Welcome to another fun Friday photo mishmash. Still working with that name. I had a lot of great suggestions last week. We'll get to some of those in just a second. But first, I've brought in a guest, maybe going to be a recurring guest in future episodes of this podcast. I'm going to start calling it a podcast. Some people made some good points about that. This is Christina Bernales. She is a wedding photographer, and I am her assistant when she is a wedding photographer. I'll put a link to her website down below so you can see more about her down there. I'll put a link to your Instagram as well. She needs more Instagram followers. We all do. So, welcome.
Thanks.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the names that folks suggested last week for this photo cast, and then you actually had a suggestion too. Paul Best said Photo Corner, Photo Flow, Toby's Weekly Exposure. Paul,
it's a good suggestion.
I like the suggestions. They're good. The last one, I think of myself in a trench coat wandering the park in a sketchy way. Jordan Jackson Piper, Week Speak. I want photo in there somewhere, so we need photo in there, but I like or weekly stuff. Bailey Pierce has a couple different suggestions. Photo Portfolio, Photo Rehab, and Photography Recap. I like Photography Recap.
Photography Recap is pretty good.
It's good. Break It Bent talks with Toby. If you're a recurring guest, we'd have to work your name in there. Talks with Toby and Christina. TWT for short. I like that. Cooper likes Toby's Topics. Chad Harp likes, what's he like? Photo Chat. I like that. And Robert Duffy, Our World TTL Through the Lens. That's quite good too as well. So I think there were a couple others, but those were the ones that stood out to me. So just a reminder, this is just kind of a general open topic. Usually answer some reader questions, not in this order. Talk a little bit about photo news from the past week. Maybe touch on some videos that went out. And this week we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to incorporate some photo critiquing into this, and that's one of the main reasons I asked for Christina along.
And I had a suggestion for a name too.
Oh, right. What was your suggestion?
My suggestion is to call it Photo Banter.
Photo Banter.
So maybe we'll put it to a vote and then ask the readers. So we'll narrow down our favorites from the suggestions, and then we'll ask people to vote on it. How about that?
Sounds good. So maybe I'll put up a poll. Check the link down below. See if there's a poll down there with some of these suggestions, and you could vote and have a say in what this thing should be called. Thanks in advance for that. All right, so get into the news of the week, and really just going to pick up one piece to talk about, and that is Fuji's release of the eagerly anticipated, much leaked Fuji X-T1.
Very exciting.
It is exciting. I'm going to pick up the spec sheet to make sure I get all of the specs correct. What do you know about this camera?
It's very cool. Well, what I'm excited about is the possibility of being able to replace the big bulky DSLRs for a camera that can perform just as well and that is much more compact. A lot more, low profile camera.
So this isn't a DSLR. That's a really important distinction. It is in that category of mirrorless cameras. To be a DSLR, you have to have a mirror, and that little reflex of the lens flipping, or not the lens, sorry, the mirror flipping up out of the way. And when you look through the viewfinder, the optical viewfinder, your eyesight is going through the prism, down to the mirror, out through the lens. So you're seeing exactly what the camera sees. These mirrorless cameras are ditching the mirror. That's why they're called mirrorless. And the benefit of that is they can be much smaller. A drawback of that is no optical viewfinder. So instead of an optical viewfinder, you have an electronic viewfinder.
Which can still be really nice.
Which can be really nice. And a lot of the buzz about this camera is the fact that this is going to be, all things point to this, an amazing viewfinder. So, right now, an optical viewfinder is really nice. It's exactly what you see when the light is low. It still is passing through all of that information. Traditionally, electronic viewfinders are really started to suffer in low light because they get noisy, just like the actual pictures do. And that's difficult. You also have a little bit of lag with those.
Yeah.
And they just haven't been great. especially for higher speed action, mostly because of that lag. Now, I'm not saying this necessarily is going to be great for higher speed action, but it's going to be, I'd say, 2.7 million, 2.3. Yep, 2.3 million dots inside this 100% coverage viewfinder.
Well, the nice thing about digital viewfinder, and I think, I think the optical or the lack thereof is going to be missed by a lot of people. I'll probably miss it because that's what I'm used to, and I like to see a scene the way it is normally, and then, find my exposure and composition. But it's going to make things a lot easier, I think, for photographers because you can see what the photo is going to look like with the digital viewfinder. And, you can probably, I think that X100 even had
an earlier model from the Fuji.
Yeah, a digital histogram, that you could see through the viewfinder. So then, you don't even have to chimp anymore to look at your histogram. You just see it right there. So that's really very cool. So I think that the lack of optical viewfinder is something that some people are going to miss, but I think that, we'll quickly get over it because there's so many benefits to a digital viewfinder. So especially if it's going to be so nice.
Yep. Very large, very bright, so that's not exciting. 16 megapixels. Do you feel like that's too little, too few?
I don't think so. Based on the years that we've shot weddings and the kind of pictures that most people get printed, the majority are no larger than an 8x10. And then anybody who does get a photo printed to like a 24x36, even with 16 megapixels, you'd have more than enough. I would say if you're going to print billboard-sized pictures, then 16 megapixels wouldn't be enough. But then again, you may as well just go to medium format camera at that point because you're not really going to be able to print billboard-sized images with a DSLR either, unless you're looking at the D700.
Right. I think, a lot of people are still stuck. I get these questions from time to time. Oh, the Nikon's 24 and the Canon's 18 megapixels. Nikon's much better, right? And the Nikon may be better, but not because of that difference. When you take that difference in megapixels and spread it around four sides of an image, it is really a small amount. And same between 16, 18, and 24. These are very small differences. They sound fairly big, but they're not that large. And it really is much more about the quality of the sensor, the density of the pixels, than the actual number. So I personally would be happy with a lower number that was a high-quality sensor rather than trying to cram as many pixels on there as you could.
And I'm really excited to see how this line that Fuji's putting out moves, forward and what they do with it. And I think that we're only going to see better and better sensors out of Fuji, and I'm just really excited for the possibilities. This camera in particular is supposed to be the the workhorse camera compared to the previous model. So I would be really interested to take it out on a wedding setting and see how it does.
Certainly a step up, much more professional. The other bits that are exciting about this camera is the fact that it's in a rugged, freeze-proof, weatherproof body. It's going to be sold with some weather-resistant lenses. And not cheap, though. You're going to be paying for all of this technology. And very manual controls, too, festooned with dials and buttons. So a lot of manual control, which is what a lot of people like, a lot of more professional shooters.
Yeah, well, I think it's a professional grade, at least,
Absolutely.
It's a professional grade.
So the price, $1,700 with the 18 to 55 kit, $1,300 for body only, and they're going to be releasing lenses over the next year or so, some weatherproofed, some not. So that's the Fuji X-T1.
I want it.
I would like, of course, to have as many gadgets and gadgets as possible, but I also have to be realistic and think about that I own Canon cameras. I own or have access to, through Christina, a slew of really nice lenses, so it makes it hard to really think about picking up another line of lenses, and there are adapters out there. I could use Canon lenses on this camera, but everything starts to get a little clunky almost anytime you involve adapters. So it certainly looks beautiful. It's going to make beautiful images, but for now, I'm going to be sticking with Canon.
I will too, but I still want it.
We do want it. Okay. So I had a question this past week, and I'm going to get better about writing down who's asked these questions when I'm talking about them in the video. But I had a question about how I feel about the GoPro after I've had it now for a little bit longer. I definitely plan to come back and do some more in-depth reviews of the GoPro. But I will say quickly that I still really like it. I almost want to say I love it, but two things hold me back from that. It isn't perfect. It has crashed on me a handful of times now. I used it fairly heavily on the California trip. I used it almost every day, either for drive lapses or little 360 video spins. I'll put a sample of that up. I'm still working on getting all of those out. Lots of files to process. And some underwater shots that were a lot of fun. I have a fun Instagram that I'm really happy with the way it came out. So it is a really cool little device with a ton of uses. You don't have to be necessarily jumping out of planes or, I was going to say skydiving, but that's the same thing as jumping out of planes. Bungee jumping, mountain biking.
Extreme sports.
Extreme sports. You don't have to be doing extreme sports to have one. I did feel like that was true before it, but I wanted one enough that I bought it. But
the videos, the ads certainly make you think that you need to.
Yes, yeah, it's true. But there are really a lot of cool things that you can do with it. And so I will be talking more about it, but my general opinion so far still is thumbs up. What did I say? Battery life is atrocious. Please get yourself some spare batteries. The Wasabi seem just great. Or use a USB backup battery, which works very nicely. We did that for a long drive lapse, and that happily powered it all day long. So, yeah, that's all I want to say about the GoPro. Just want to check in, a quick check-in on that. And you've seen some of the shots from it. I mean, as somebody who shoots with 5D Mark III and a prime lens, how do you feel about the quality that comes out of the GoPro?
They're pretty nice, yeah. They're cool. I just like the videos and how easy it is to just set up. Like we had it during the California trip. We just had it mounted on the rear view mirror, and then had like a shoelace for safety. But yeah, and it did just fine, and we drove pretty fast, and so we were a little worried at first, but then it was fine. Yep. And even then, they're pretty tough. So I don't know.
For those who've actually watched all of it when I was packing and I talked about bringing the suction cup mount for the GoPro and saying I was only going to use it inside because you're not allowed to mount it outside your camera. States have different laws about that. We went ahead and did that.
Outside your car.
Outside your car. Because the shot was much better. Still didn't end up being anything amazing. Not really the GoPro's fault. Just kind of the angle and the height of it. It didn't work out. So it's neat. It's a good memory. But it didn't necessarily translate into the full epicness of that coastal drive there along Highway 1 in California. So, yeah. But overall, GoPro's good.
It was fun.
Yeah. So as I said at the beginning, one of the reasons why I invited Christina into this Friday photo mishmash is we're going to do some photo critiquing of images that you all have uploaded to the Flickr group. This is going to soon be a regular video of its own, hopefully weekly. We'll see if you know, it may be a little while to get up and running so that it is weekly, but regularly, let's say that, where we're going to critique some of those images. And as I said, Christina is a wedding photographer, has a wonderful eye, so it's nice to have kind of her opinion. I think mine is great, but it's always nice to have a second opinion when we're looking through some of these images, and there may be one image that speaks to her more than another that speaks to me. So we're going to dive right in and critique some of your pictures. We just picked out a couple of them that kind of jumped out to us out of that group. If your image didn't get picked, don't feel bad. And I think I'm going to tend to be a little bit nicer in this first critique, just to kind of ease into it.
I'm mean.
You're mean?
I'm mean.
Good cop, bad cop. But I don't really think she's capable of being mean. But
I'm pretty mean.
Actually, I've seen her be pretty mean. See, this is the thing. I've taken pictures that I thought were great and then showed her, and she just goes like this.
That's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
I like to be honest. Honesty is the best policy.
So harsh. So harsh. So let's dive right into taking a look at some of these images and sharing some thoughts about them.
Do it.
And it's going to give you an idea. As I said, I'm going to be a little bit on the nicer side, but it's going to give you some ideas of what we're kind of looking for in future critiques. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to upload only what we're looking for.
No.
But it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of things that we're considering when we're determining whether or not an image is good or interesting. Yeah. Okay, let's get right into it. Alright, so we are in my digital.photo.rec or digital photo rec Flickr group. There's a link to this right down below. Feel free to throw some videos in. Our membership is growing and number of images up here. It's really fun. Even if I don't get to comment on every image, it's been great watching this grow, and I will be in here more and more often.
All the images that were submitted were really great. It was really fun to see them. I'd never been into the group, and yep, they were nice.
Nice. So the first one we're looking at was just uploaded. I think it was uploaded today, but it looks like it was taken almost a year ago from Nia. Burning Love. Now my first question, Nia, is did you only light the first match and did it catch the rest on fire as it went around the corner like dominoes? That's what I want to know. I'm going to say yes.
And I'm going to say that you have a very active imagination.
I think it's true. So this was taken with a T2i and the 50 f1.8 at 3.2 and shutter speed of 1/8 of a second.
And the ISO was 200.
The ISO was 200. So
I like it.
You like it. Right away, I
nice.
wonder, it does look sharp enough, but was it on a tripod? Because when you're down at 1/8 of a second and shooting with a 50mm, you are going to get some hand blur. And I don't really see hand blur, so I'm going to say this was on a tripod, or that, Nia, you have very steady hands. So you picked this. You liked it. What do you like about it?
I don't know. I've never seen anything like that before. It's just really cool. It stood out to me to be a very unique picture. I like the composition a lot. It's very well balanced, and I like the heart and how it's put together. I'm very big on detail, and I really enjoyed it.
So you mentioned balance. I think, it's interesting. I think a lot of people would be inclined to just put this smack dab in the center, and Nia did not. She's left some kind of negative space over on the left-hand side. And the way that the heart leads in from over there and around, I think that really works.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I think that the main focus of the image is actually the brightest spot, and that's not necessarily either smack dab in the middle or far enough to the left or the right to say that it follows the rules of third exactly. But I don't know. It just, to me, it feels very balanced, and it feels like a nice picture. Nice. If I had any feedback or criticism to say about the picture, is that the flame at the very top is cut off, and I would just I maybe watch for it or try to Photoshop it or something, but it's not a huge deal.
Okay, yep, a little cut off there. Okay, next one. This one's also from Nia. Feels a little unfair to do more than one from somebody, but this one jumped out at me. I'm going to say that Nia does own a tripod, because here we have what looks to be a 10-second exposure. Certainly not handheld, so this was sitting on a tripod or some other steady. And the result of that is you get this very kind of milky water surface, because any ripples have smoothed themselves out, and it looks quite nice. So, I like this. I'm not crazy about this gate being cut off over here on the left. It's either, I feel either I should see more of it, or less of it. But otherwise, I like this dock kind of just stretching across. It divides the space up quite nicely. Yeah. And the colors in the sky and in the water both complement each other very well. It's a really nice reflection. Right.
I was going to say, to me, my favorite thing about this picture is the colors, for sure. It's just a really nice color palette. But at the same time, I would agree about the gate. I would want to see that completely out of the photo. And but then, the bottom, it almost balances out the bottom right, the little marshes and the grass on the bottom right. So, yeah, I don't know. I think if you were to cut it off, it would probably throw the whole picture out of balance, but it still feels a little funny. The other one thing that I might fix is just, it's a little tiny bit crooked. So I might just crop it or straighten the angle just a tiny bit on the horizon. The dock is okay to be a little bit crooked because it's at an angle, but the horizon, I might straighten the horizon.
The right-hand side is just a tiny bit higher than the left.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
okay,
that's what I might do.
And I see that the way Nia achieved this 10-second exposure, she went all the way up to f/19 aperture, so really close her aperture down. I do that same thing when I want to shoot those longer exposures, but you do have to be careful as you get up there, as I just talked about the other night in my sharper tips for sharper videos. Anything really above f10, f11, you can start to lose some sharpness due to diffraction. But again, in this picture, and I've done the same thing to get those longer shutter speeds. All right, and I like that these reeds have moved a little bit of motion, a little bit of life to them. All right, I picked this one, Jack Spready. I think the exposure deep inside this fire here is just spot on. I don't know if you just shot automatic or not. This is the 70D with the kit lens at 135, 1/250th of a second, f/5.6, ISO 400. So, just nice. I liked it, and I like that it's a really nice, tight shot. I think a lot of times folks could get a better shot by being tighter, closer in. And this is, kind of interesting, and it's a fire, but I like it. Do you have any comments about it?
I don't think I have much to add. I didn't think about before until you said it, about the outside exposure versus the inside exposure, because I feel like the inside exposure should be a lot brighter, like significantly brighter than the on either side of the wood that's on the outside. But so it's the exposure is consistent, so it makes me wonder if it's either a double exposure or if the shadows were brought up significantly in post. But it's cool. Yeah, I like it.
That's very cool. All right, you picked this one.
I just like pets.
All right, folks. So if you've got a picture of your pet, put it up here.
I will pick it,
and Christina will pick it.
No, I think it's a really great portrait of a dog. I can really tell his personality in this picture. It's just his eyes, his face, his eyes, and his body are tack sharp. And even though it's really challenging to take, good pictures when there's not a lot of greens and a lot of foliage. So, this looks like it was probably taken, in around winter time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's just, I think it captures the essence of the dog very, very perfectly. The composition's really nice. The only thing that bothers me is that the paw at the very bottom is cut off, but that I can overlook that because everything else is so nice about it. Yeah, and I was even going to say that the white balance looks a little blue, but I don't know, I think it works with this picture. It's really nice and very moody and still really pretty and very emotive.
This picture has a kind of monochromatic feel to it. The colors are all very similar. We got a couple little green leaves in there, but the dog color, the leaf color, even I feel like the tongue color and the tag color are all very similar.
Yeah.
This was taken with the D5300 and the 35. Love that lens on that camera. And the focus on the eyes is spot on. Now I did that 5 tips for sharper pictures this week, and then I asked you all to leave some tips about your sharper. I'm going to do a follow-up using your tips because you've got great ones in there. And one of them was make sure the eyes are in focus, and that if there are eyes in your shot, those should be the center of focus. Not the center of the image necessarily, but the center of focus. And really nice there. Good job.
Nailed it.
This is another by Little Dano 50. Also using the D5300 with the 18-140 now. And I wonder how much post-processing here, because it's shooting into the sun, challenging conditions oftentimes for cameras, and the trees are not completely in shadow. They are lit, so I wonder if there was some bringing up the shadows in Lightroom here. But I like the jumble and the colors here. It's kind of a messy photo that works for me.
Yep, I like it too. And I think that, the subject, which would be the sun, which is the brightest spot in the photo, is smack dab in the middle, but there's just so much going on around it that it really works, so I like it.
This is a third by Lil Dano, but I wanted to pick this one out because these rocks here are cool, and I like this action of this person here crossing, but way too far away for it to be interesting. And so this shot needs to decide what it wants to do. Either you really get in on this person crossing and make that the center of focus, or really kind of get low and capture these kind of tendrils of rocks that are moving away from us. That's what I'm going to call them. One or the other, but right now it's just kind of doing both, and it looks like a snapshot to me. Do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, it looks a little bit, nicer than a snapshot, but I do agree that it is kind of confusing what the whole, what's happening in the picture and what's the purpose of the picture. Again, horizon, I would just tilt it a little and make it straight.
The right hand is a little on the downside now. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you see?
Yeah, it's just the horizon line, which is,
yeah,
it's this. It's a little bit sloped to the right. I'm just a big stickler about that. I like straight horizons and straight lines.
I know we picked one coming up that illustrates that some more.
Okay.
Okay. Virginie, I think that's how you say it, in France. And she actually has a good number of images that I really like in the Flickr group. This is a more recent one that we pulled out. This kind of nice panoramic shot, cold, but with some color and life in it. I think it's really nicely composed. Again, or I shouldn't say again, but in this case, really you got the bulk of those colors over on the right-hand side, and you just kind of get to see the gradient from color to much less color over on the left. I like that. I think, again, some people would tend to just put the really colorful part smack in the middle, and I like that it's not in the middle in this image.
I like it a lot. It's a beautiful place and beautifully photographed. And I like the crop too. I think a lot of times panoramic crops can make a not very strong photo look a lot stronger. And I'm not sure that this was the case. This may have been on panoramic from the beginning, but I like panoramic shots.
And very nicely use the rule of thirds here as well, because the horizon or the top of the trees, neither of that is the halfway point. That's really the bottom third.
Yeah.
And then the top 2/3 is sky. And again, you could also even argue that the bright colored area is in the right 1/3. And then we have this kind of color in the left, or the middle third, and then your darker area in the left third. So nicely composed. Nice job. All right, as I said, I picked this one. I'm sorry, I'm going to not be able to pronounce this name very well. Maybe Yasmin?
Justin, I think.
Say that again?
Probably Justin, but I'm not sure.
Had some other really nice shots in the gallery, some beautiful bird shots. But I wanted to pick this one to make an example of it. My English teacher did that my senior year. Man, I hated her ever after that. She read my paper in front of everybody, and she didn't tell them it was mine, which I guess I'm doing even worse. But anyway, too much talking. What I'm trying to say is I really don't care for the tilted horizon shots. They almost always don't work for me. And so this is a neat shot. It caught my eye. I think this is a bubble sitting on some water. It's very cool. And you could argue that tilting adds some maybe dynamics to the image, but I just keep waiting for everything to fall off to the right, and it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of pictures that are tilted so much either. I just feel like it's kind of, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a little distracting. But, to each.
I have seen it work, but I'm not a fan usually.
Yeah, I'm not a fan either.
So, just wanted to share that. Use that as an example.
I picked that one. I just love the contrast. It's really beautiful. And it's so simple. And I love the crop. I love the square crop.
Originally squared off for Instagram. I think it's a lot of fun to shoot square often. And remember, with your camera, especially on the Canon side, you can set it to shoot 1:1, and when in live view, it will frame a square for you, which is fun. You can always crop after the fact, of course, as well. But it's different, because for so long we've shot for that 3:2 ratio, and now to shoot square still use your rule of thirds, and this nicely, I think, fills that again. And it's nice. I like it too. You shot with the 40mm f2.8, which I love. ISO 2500, getting a little grainy, a little noisy, but it works just fine for this
black
image.
and white usually. It can take some grain, a lot of grain.
Meaning you can have a lot more grain in a black and white and it'd be fine?
Yeah, I mean, I just like grain in general, in black and white and color, because it sort of looks a little bit like film, but black and white, I think grain makes it look a little bit more timeless. Yeah, I add grain to a lot of my pictures. I love that one. And there was actually another one that is sort of the same idea as a panning shot, but it's in color. And I couldn't decide which one I like more, even though they're quite similar. But it's just, I don't know. I'm really drawn to that, to this shot. And I think I may be drawn to the shot in color a little bit more, just because...
Let's switch over to the color one.
Yeah, there we go. And just the subject matter and the composition, it's just a really, really great shot.
Yeah, I'd love to do a tutorial on panning shots sometime in the not so distant future. They can be really cool because it's I was going to say easy, but it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. But it very, very nicely sets your subject apart from the background, similar to doing a very shallow depth of field, but with really that kind of obviously motion in there. And both this one and the black and white are nicely done. There's some other busy, almost starting to get distracting bits going on, but overall I think it works really well and it's a cool shot.
Well, it not only sets your subject apart, but it also it tells a story, and I like that. And yeah, this picture makes me wonder so many things. It makes me want to go to this place.
So was this shot with an Apple iPad, I wonder? That's what Flickr thinks.
That's interesting.
So, and Visco, processed with Visco. So that is pretty impressive if you've shot that with an iPad.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it wasn't, but...
I don't know.
I really don't think so.
Okay. Well, we're going to finish up with that one. You know, just a couple, but we'll get into more when we do these in the future. So let's answer some reader questions now. So let's finish up tonight with some reader questions. The first one's from Elisa Kenny. She has got a T5i. It's her first DSLR, and she wants to make sure that she is treating it right as far as keeping it happy temperature-wise. Is there any tips for taking care of your DSLR when it's too hot or too cold? And there's actually a question I got earlier this week about taking care of your DSLR when it's cold. This is a person up in Canada. I'm sorry I didn't write their name down. But, you know, we're down into temperatures in the negative Fahrenheit. So, you know, 10 below, 0, 10 above Fahrenheit. It's been cold. And so what kind of things can you do with your DSLR to keep it happy?
I don't know. Well, the one thing that probably is you should really keep in mind is when you're transporting, when you've been shooting outside a lot and you're bringing it inside and you want to keep shooting, you're not able to shoot for a while because the lens is going to fog up. Is that correct?
Right. So the main thing you have to worry about when it's cold outside is bringing it back inside to a warmer environment. All that moisture in the air is going to condense on your cold camera. Now, well, actually, when it's been so cold, the air is so dry that there really isn't much moisture to condense on your camera or in your camera. But if you have a warm, humid house, or this has actually happened to me, true story, shooting outside, very cold, and then walked into a greenhouse, this cool botanical gardens, and my camera fogged up, and for 20 minutes it was just completely unusable. Sure, you could wipe the condensation off the front lens, but it was on the viewfinder, and it would just come right back. Yeah. So the tip, or the way to deal with that in that case, is to bring along a nice, sturdy gallon Ziploc bag. Before you go into the warmer environment, seal it up, squish out all the air, go inside, and so now the camera is going to get some condensation on it, but very, very little because you're not allowing the moisture in the air to get through that plastic bag. And as the camera warms up, then you take it out, and the condensation was like, hey, I don't care about this camera. It's not cold enough to condense on.
I've heard somewhere that you can also just put it like in your coat when you're outside and just help it warm up if you're not using it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you bring it back inside and it's not that cold, then it's going to be less of an issue as well. All manuals do state the minimum degrees that the camera should be operated at. I have to make that disclaimer. You should follow that. But I have used a non-weatherproof, just plain old DSLR at much, much colder temperatures than it says, and it's fine. It's fine out there.
Yeah, and I mean, we shoot with 5Ds, but I think this applies for all cameras that, you know, they're pretty tough. You know, they're. I think you probably would really have to. I don't know. I guess we would have to test it, but I think that they're fine in cold weather.
They are.
They should be fine.
They are. Yep. And battery life, though, is going to be negatively impacted if you're out there in the real cold. So just keep that in mind. But honestly, probably your batteries are going to last longer than your fingers are going to if it's really that cold. But if you want to be outside shooting for a long time, you should have a spare battery. You should keep that spare battery inside a jacket pocket to keep it warm, and then you can swap it out.
Wear gloves.
Wear gloves. And the little, you know, it's funny now, the gloves that allow you to keep texting on the touch screens, those are nice for the Canon folks because you can still operate a lot of the camera. And those are thinner usually and allow you to get to the buttons and dials and the touch screen without too much of an issue. On the other side of the fence, something we're not really worried about right now, but we will in a couple months, is heat. And I would say the heat can be a lot more damaging to your camera than the cold. You really want to keep your camera out of direct sunlight. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're out on a nice sunny day and you put it on a tripod to take a picture and the sun's shining on it for 5-10 minutes, that's fine.
I mean, like keeping it in your car under the sun, letting it cook all day.
Right.
That's what we mean.
Yeah.
You should not do that.
Yeah, that's bad. So keep it out of direct sunlight in very hot environments for extended periods of time. But really just kind of common sense there. And I do have an older video from last summer that talked about taking it to the beach. And another tip there was use a gallon Ziploc bag to kind of keep that salt, heat, humidity, not heat, but salt and humidity air from being in constant contact with the camera. But again, like Christina said, these cameras are pretty tough. And I know you spent a lot of money on it and you want to baby it. But at the same time, you spend a lot of money on it to get nice pictures. So don't make it difficult for yourself to take good photos. One other piece of, I think, interesting information about there is that there are some, I've come across some articles written about very cold weather shooting with your camera and getting better image quality, especially for longer exposures. A lot of the noise we get on longer exposure images is from the sensor itself getting warmer and hotter. And as it gets hotter, it generates more noise in the image. And so for some starry night shots, when you have really, really low temperatures, there's some evidence out there that you can actually get a cleaner image with those ultra cold temperatures. But we're talking very, very cold. And I think the differences probably are slight. But it was something I came across that I thought was interesting.
That's interesting. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah. And that's one of the things why if you're trying to get clean images on long exposures, you should give your camera breaks and you should give the sensor breaks from time to time.
Probably a wise idea.
Yeah. Again, sorry about pronunciations of names. Not always sure I'm getting them right. But Firaz Ahmed had some questions about the 50 f1.4. He read on the internet, and I said in a previous video that can be very dangerous to do, that it is a little soft, especially wide open, and maybe even suffers some focusing issues. And this was a lens, the 51.4 was a lens I recommended in my recent recommended lenses. And I think there was also some discussion there of why didn't I recommend the 51.8. But just kind of your thoughts on the 51.4. It's a lens that we own. We actually own 2 copies of. Yeah. And we've shot with before.
Yeah. It's a nice lens for the money. I think as soon as you get past 2.0 into 1.8 and 1.6 and 1.4, you are going to see a lot softer, an image that's a lot softer, especially around the edges. You can't expect it to perform at 100% all the way through. But but it's nice. I mean, like I said, for the money, it's a nice lens. If you want sharpness and, you know, a nice, crisp photo all the way through, then I would just, you know, get the L lens. But I don't think that it's, you should completely no longer consider the lens just because it's sharp or not as sharp around the edges at, you know, 1.4, because that's its maximum aperture, and most lenses are going to be pretty soft around the edges at the maximum aperture.
Yep.
So, but it's a nice lens, and I've never had any issues with it focusing, or I've never experienced it being extremely slow. I've had a nice experience with it. What made me go to the 51.2, and I shot with the 51.4 for a number of years and was completely happy with it. The L lenses just have a nicer, the color rendition for those lenses is a lot nicer than the mid-range lenses. And in terms of consistency, and this is, you know, I'm looking at thousands of pictures at a time, and so for me, I start noticing the very minute details. But so in terms of consistency, the 51.2 was a better choice for me, but I think the 51.4 is nice.
The 51.2 sells for about $1,200?
1,200, 1,400, I can't remember.
I think it's somewhere around there.
I think, yeah.
So again, it's having realistic expectations. The 51.4 sells for just over $300. I've seen it as low as $290 at times.
And you can buy it used too.
That's right.
For a lot less.
Yep.
So.
And so for the money, it is a good lens, very good lens. That's why I'm standing behind my recommendation for that. And I really think in general the internet does love to kind of latch on to certain experiences that a few individuals have had and really run with those. But the general consensus on this lens is that it's very good for the money.
Well, I don't know. And even, I mean, $400 is not a small amount of money. So I think that when you're doing your research online and you're looking at everything anybody's ever said about a specific item that you're looking to purchase, that costs $400, all of the negative things are going to be very apparent, and you know, and you're going to be a lot more just wary of that because it is a large sum of money. So, but for the money, that particular lens I think performs really well, and I would recommend it. I mean, $400 to $1,200 is a big jump.
It is a big jump. Yep. And you're talking about weight too. The 51.2 is a heavy lens.
Yeah, a little bit heavier.
The 51.4 is not a heavy lens. It's light.
No, it's definitely not. It's smaller.
It's right around here. Okay. So the last question isn't a question, actually. It was a great tip out of several great tips on how to get sharper images. As I said, I'm going to be making a follow-up video to that. But I'm going to read that to you in just a second, but I wanted to kind of quiz you first. You're in a low-light environment, and you have a choice of lowering your shutter speed to get a good exposure or raising your ISO to get a good exposure. Which would you prefer?
Definitely raising my ISO.
Why?
Because, well, one, these, you know, sensors, the newer sensors on these newer cameras, perform really, really well, and they're designed to perform really, really well in low light conditions. And any noise that you do get from shooting at high ISOs, you can correct in post, whereas motion blur and, you know, handshake blur, you cannot correct that for that in post. Although Photoshop had something in the works that was supposed to correct that.
It's in Photoshop CC that we have.
Oh, I've never tried it. I should try it.
It doesn't work that well.
Doesn't? Okay.
No.
Well, I mean,
I tried it on
that's probably like a tiny bit of motion blur.
Right.
If it does work.
It does something. It makes the image better. But, you know, I agree 100% with what Christina said there. And this was from Video Frank.
Well, I wanted to finish my thought, actually. Because, well, not so you can correct for it in post, but also if you have a correctly exposed image and even a little bit overexposed. So if your meter reads something over, 0, which is right in the middle, the noise is not going to be as apparent. If you have a correctly exposed photo, you're going to have a lot less noise than if you have an underexposed photo at a high ISO. So if you are going to turn up your ISO, turn it up high enough so that you have a properly exposed picture. That's what I do with all of my pictures. And I honestly just really learned to embrace the grain, and I really like it in a lot of my pictures. And some pictures that don't have grain, I might even add some. But that's, of course, a personal preference. But just in terms of practicality, definitely ISO. But proper exposure is key.
So I'm going to read Video Frank's post here in a second, but where he's coming from, I think it's a he, is I said one of the ways to keep your images sharp is to keep your ISO low, because the more grain you got in them, the softer they're going to look. But don't mistake that for me saying sacrifice your shutter speed over your ISO. Video Frank says, when in low light conditions, don't be shy to use that higher ISO. There are 2 things you need for a sharp image: properly focused lens and short exposure time. Higher ISO allows the short exposure time. Flash can help too. That's very, very true. I can't tell you how much a external flash can help your photography, and we're going to be talking lots more about that very soon. There's a lot of people that have been asking for more about the external flash, and you'd be a great resource for some of those as well. But so I just wanted to share that because I think it's great. It's worth sharing more than once. As I said, I'll be sharing some of these in a follow-up tip video next week or maybe the week after. So you've made it to the end of another Friday Photo Fun Banter Photo Talk Weekly Exposure Toby Talks About Photography with guest Christina podcast.
Way too long.
Thank you. That's too long of a title?
Yeah.
That's what I decided I was going to go with. No. Look down below for a poll. There's a link to a poll, or find us over on Facebook. I'll put a poll link there sometime soon, and give me your thoughts. There'll be a spot for other, where you can suggest other titles that you think would work well for this thing. Thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It is so powerful. Thank you.